Welcome back to the Namra podcast, here with Russ and Justin. And this week we're going to be talking about all the aspects of storytelling and why it's so impactful in content and how storytelling well can really help you on social media. So stay tuned.
I'm very excited for this one.
Start us off there, storytelling.
This is right down my alley here.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about pretty much all of the aspects that that makes a good story, why you want to storytell in your content anyways, and what like the marketing perspective of storytelling is, why you'd want to do that from marketing perspective.
So there's really like two ways. There's two big buckets to look at this in. There's the creative side of storytelling, the visual aspect, the script, that stuff that you really are an expert in. And then I look at it as the marketing side. It's how can we tell the right story and tell it to the right person and resonate properly to actually get them to take action or listen or whatever that end goal is, right? Those
Absolutely.
are the two major things.
Absolutely. And there's so many other things that fall under that, but you said it best. There's two main pillars and those are them.
Yeah. So let's talk first about, I guess, the more boring stuff, and then we can get into some of the more like technical sides of like video production or whatever, or even anything else. But when you're telling a story, do you guys have any like keys or tips that you try to tell clients or try to keep in mind when you are storytelling?
Well, mine would be just every time anything, it would be what's your goal.
Yep.
So I mean,
Absolutely.
whether from marketing standpoint, creative standpoint, end goal, tangibility, what is your goal? So that's step number one.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, maybe it would make sense to just do a quick, back up quickly and say, okay, storytelling, we're going off the assumption that that's a good idea. But what the numbers bear out is on social media, when you look at top performing video posts as far as engagement, view length, views in general, it bears out that storytelling well and making content that tells a story, even if you're trying to get some idea across, if you just do it in a story fashion, it gets watched and consumed more frequently, more often, longer duration. Yep. And this is like, we know this. Like, this is kind of like almost a common sense thing, right? Because think about it, if you're in sales, if you're in business, if you're trying to convince your girlfriend to like go to the movie or whatever it is, it's like, if you can convey that information in a story or do something differently, like
storytellers are the best salesmen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
I mean, why do you think it still works? Because people feel like they could relate to some of the people, whether it's, for a character trait, a character archetype, or whether it's like because they feel like they've experienced the same experiences and they can see themselves in that person's role.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, if they ever talk about like a director in Hollywood, Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, the term they always use is like, he's an amazing storyteller, and it's like, okay, but how?
Yeah. No, I think actually a good thing. Shout out to Darren Cole. He was one of the guests that we've had on the podcast. He was the very first person that opened my eyes into the severity of how important storytelling is, and it's how fundamental it is in everything that you do.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that you can touch on. So, I mean, like you said, there's technical things that you can go into. You use these technical tools that help tell your story, help push you along. In your perspective, right, you have, like we mentioned, character archetypes, because you want to be able to pick a particular audience member and gear your sales towards that audience member. So that's another thing to focus on, another technical aspect or another tool to focus on too.
Because when you're telling those stories, people are going to put themselves into the story.
Right.
So when you're watching a TV show or whatever, you're going to identify partially with each one of those characters. That's kind of the idea. But what were you going to say, Russ?
Just that it comes down to our goal as marketers is retention. We just talked on the last episode about how you have 10 seconds to get somebody's attention. And if you can't grab their attention in the first 10 seconds, they're gone. They're definitely not going to get to the end of the commercial and see what the ad's actually for. So a story allows you to sort of have a setup, and at that like 3-4 second mark, something happens, and then it's what's going to happen next. And so that little added story or plot to any sort of video, even if it's just a little tidbit of information you're trying to get out there, like I said before, like even if you just say, hey, Justin, what's this about? And then you give the answer, at least that's some extra sort of like plot, as opposed to you just saying like, hi, I'm Justin, and this is what we do at Namra, and blah, 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 like just spitting the info out.
And that works because as an audience member, from your perspective to the audience, you've put out a call. Now the audience is invested. They want to know the answer to this question that you've proposed, and they're going to more than likely stick around to find it out. Right. And that's the key, because once you give them what they want, you need to have them ready for the next. What am I coming back again?
And that's an example of the simplest version of a story. But obviously the goal is to create some sort of like cool setup and plot and like scenario where you're super engaged within the first 2 seconds, and you are definitely going to watch the entire minute-long ad and see what happens. That's like the best sort of commercial there is, are those ones where you're gripped, like the best Super Bowl commercials. It's like second one, you're like in the action, you want to see what's going to happen, and then bam, Doritos at the end.
There's a payoff.
Like the minute flew by, there's jokes, there's a plot, there's clearly well written story.
So it's like, if you were to draw it up, like one really objectively good aspect of a good story, and you say good, it's like it draws you in. It makes you want to know what happens next, right?
That list that you were looking at earlier.
Exactly.
This, then what?
Yep.
Then this, then what?
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
And so for any of you guys at home, like there's one thing I wanted to kind of bring up was it's called the Pixar storytelling playlist. Every single Pixar movie kind of follows a very, very similar format. And it falls into this one that's up on the screen here. Once upon a time, there was. Every day, blank happened. One day, blank happened. Because of that, and because of that, until finally the end, And so it's really simple, but I think this is a good depiction and good overview of like, well, this is the typical format that you can use to, you set the scene, you draw people in, and then there has to be some sorts of up and down, and then that delivers a final payoff. Like that is the definition of a good story. We want to have something that draws you in, that has ups, downs, and then a final payoff.
And the best thing about sort of knowing what your goal for marketing is up front, again, this is why it's super important to lay that out before any sort of plot writing happens, is you can get your message out and then sort of reverse engineer whatever marketing message you have and just sort of like make up a plot around it. And that is easier than trying to write a script and come up with a plot for the message itself.
Right. If you can kind of create your North Star ahead of time, and as you develop your characters and as you develop the storyline, you kind of think like, well, where do I want to take the story next? You remember your North Star and you know, okay, well, this is my goal. How can I best create this to get us to that goal next? So I love that you brought this. I wish I actually knew that we were going to talk about this, because I would have definitely loved to bring some of this stuff in next time.
No, absolutely. And we can talk about this in a future episode too. But I think, like you said, have an end goal in mind. And then, like, it's okay to have drafts, to write the whole story out and then kind of critique it and refine it as you go. And this is just one way. If you're looking to create a video and you don't know what to do or what to talk about, here's a good sample. Make something. Once upon a time, everyone, I don't know, needed to buy a house or whatever, and they didn't know how to do it. So you can follow this and start telling a story that way and create content around it.
And like we said earlier, it goes back to like the audience is feeling like they are a part of the story. Like I guarantee you, if you tell a very loose, general story, but also have very specific points throughout it, people are going to relate to it no matter what it is.
Yeah.
Like you could be like conquering a dragon, and like people, for Christ's sake, people relate to Shrek.
Yeah. Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Like, it's so outrageous, but good storytelling and really like character archetypes are what creates that.
Yep. And that's exactly what it is. Like, well, the reason why people love Game of Thrones and stuff like that, when they see or hear about someone like conquering a dragon or whatever you said, it's like, that's just a way of depicting like conquering something that was bigger than themselves that they were scared of. And then they overcame it. It's like, that's kind of how people's minds work. It doesn't have to be in a literal sense.
And now take that and go smaller than that, right? And your marketing and your social media videos and stuff like that. Like people, that's a great North Star to have, because it can apply to your social media stuff too.
Yeah. And so now let's get into some of the more technical stuff. So we kind of understand the messaging strategy, but now when it gets to be platform specific as far as marketing on social media, some key things when you are telling a story on social through video is one thing I know is like eye contact. A lot of times if you're speaking directly to the camera, you're going to get better engagement. right? Any other things like that you can kind of think of? Eye contact. I think length is another big one. Like, how long should this be? I get that question all the time. Should it be a minute, 5 minutes, 3 minutes? What are your thoughts on that? I always think a general rule is if there's no platform constraints, right? So on IG Reels, it has to be under a minute. Deal with it. Like, that's just the rule. On Facebook, there are some things that say like video, like if you're in the Facebook watch section, you want to be over 3 minutes and like 32 seconds there. And that's laid out by Facebook. These views these videos that are over 3 minutes and 30 seconds will get shared more in the watch discovery section. Mm-hmm. So outside of that, what I always try to tell people is tell the complete story that you want to get across as quickly as possible without losing anything. Like, just be concise with your words.
Yeah.
Unlike this podcast, like, we can ramble on as long as we want.
Right.
But if we were going to do something more produced or whatever, telling something specific, we want to try to keep it all as compact as possible.
Consolidate it as much as possible. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that happens in movies too. It's like, it can be a 3-hour movie if it's good.
Even when we're doing like pre-production all the way through production of any sort of like skit or plot oriented video, it's always like, here's every shot that we want. And then we shoot all of it, and we have like extended cuts of every take, and there's lots of footage, and you crunch it down as much as you can. And then it's like 1 minute and 15 seconds, but we want to get it down to 59:59. And so we crunch, and eventually we get this like super cut of the final product.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point actually that you mentioned too, is because like in the last video that we did with LaPointe, we had a storyboard. Every shot that we had, we knew exactly how we were going to plan the video out, but we also still got extra shots. We got some safety shots because as you edit, as you develop your storyline, and also as you realize like this was, for instance, it had dialogue in it. And as we were having the characters edit them together and talk to each other, like, it turns out a little different than it does on set because of the different takes and splicing them together. So to have those extra safeties and stuff like that is always a really good option. And then you can change the story a little bit if you have to.
Yeah.
So it's always a good tip.
And we're talking a lot about video because, Justin, that's your expertise. But storytelling also can come in a lot of different forms on social media.
That's right.
Right? You can do it in graphic form as well. If you're trying... The end goal for you on social might be, I want people to know that I'm a reputable, car mechanic, or a reputable mechanic, or I do a good job. Mm-hmm. So how am I going to tell that story? Well, instead of telling me, you could show me.
Right.
You could show me some before and afters, right? That's storytelling.
You could make a comic.
You
could draw the skit video that you just made, just in like comic form, and
you could even show a testimonial, like a testimonial graphic of a happy client, or they could say it for you, right? You don't always have to sit there and say, I'm a really good mechanic, I've been doing it for 10 years and I've never been sued. It's like, okay, that's one way to tell that story. Or you could have someone speak on your behalf or whatever. So those are other avenues of storytelling that I think are pretty impactful on social media.
Yeah, and I'd say with design too, like the shorter the better, the more concise, the more clean, the more to the point and impactful is probably the best form of storytelling when it comes to a design, a graphic design, because you don't have as many sensory inputs isn't really the word, but like with a video, you have sound and you have visual, and with an image, you don't, and movement and pace.
Yeah, you can't just clutter it with information.
Right.
It has to be concise.
You only got like, 11 by 16 square or whatever the aspect ratio of it is. Yeah. So,
and the art of graphic design now is like more important than ever because you're looking at flyers on your phone.
Yeah.
Not just in the mail and full 8.5 by 11. It's like, how do we take that 8.5 by 11 flyer and turn it into something that's actually like
fit to your phone
and that you're actually going to get the message, because you can't just crunch all of that down. It's too small. So how do we actually pull the real message out? What copy do we cut? And it's a lot.
Right.
One thing I tell our team all the time on the graphic side of things and on when we're posting, social media is great because we can do so much stuff there, right? We can talk about several different services we offer. We can talk about different ways we can help and different pain points we solve. But on social media, as a rule of thumb, not always, but usually in the caption and in the image itself, graphic, photo, whatever, we want to talk about one specific thing. It's one thing. It's not, hey, just so you know, we have a grand opening coming up and we're running this 2-for-1 special on this product and a 3-for-1 special on this product. And also our hours are this. It's like too much. One thing. Let's talk about one thing. Hey, we have our grand opening coming up. Here's the time. Okay. And then the image should match with the caption. And believe it or not, people don't have the caption match the image all the time. It's a lot of times it's jumbled up or it's kind of convoluted. So try to do one thing at a time. You can post every day. You don't have to get everything out there all at once. So I think that's one good thing because you'll lose people.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I could take a step back to one of your points that I thought was a good mention is in the graphic design aspect, you really have to focus on using the space that you have and communicating as effectively as possible. And one major important thing on the technical side of that is communication through nonverbal means. So whether that's color, whether that's typeface and fonts, whether that's spacing within your captions and your visuals, the shapes that you decide to put in your film or your design. So those are things that you really need to consider and like implement if you don't have the luxury of like having a 30-second video.
Yeah, exactly. If you do put a face in there, what does that face look like? Right. Like what's the expression on there? Right. One really cool thing I was reading about or watching a TikTok about or something. They were talking about how like body hair is to preserve heat, basically, but the reason why we developed like eyebrows and kept the eyebrows wasn't for like warmth or everything, but it was to show nonverbal communication signs. That's the main Darwinian function and biological function of like your eyebrows. It's like to like show expressions, and that makes sense because
hunting.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to see your
shit.
Right.
So I thought that was very, very cool. And that kind of goes into if you're making a graphic with a person's face on it, it's something you might not even think about, but it's like, is that what's
the tone of
does
their
it?
eyebrows?
Yeah,
does it tone?
Does it look like he's smelling a fart, or does it look like he's excited about your product or service? So that's one thing. That's still telling a story.
Yeah. That goes on, but like the video side too. Everything you said goes for videos too. Like colors, fonts, like the whole brand guide, super important because that's just subconsciously like, are you a high-end company or are you a small local? No matter what you're saying, it could be great, but if you have like bubbly red text or like red box with yellow text and you just look super like small towny, it doesn't matter. You got to have clean stuff. And what was the other thing?
Well, I would go off that and say like you can look at that all over the place. If like Dr. Squatch, I think that's a masculine brand that's designed for dudes. They market at dudes, or dude wipes. If you look at the logos, if you look at their branding, it's very masculine. Not just for men, but it's technically a masculine brand elements, brand tones, brand colors, fonts, that sort of stuff. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
What else did you say before that though? I lost.
Well, I'll go back to that one sec, but that you brought up a really, really good point.
We're riffing, Russ.
Yeah,
we're riffing.
Go with it,
think
bro.
about
Come
it.
on.
You think. All right, go ahead.
But one really, like, that's the thing. You're selling wipes, right? You're selling wipes to wipe your ass with or your face or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you could call them baby wipes or you call them dude wipes. And it's like, and it's funny too because you're selling the same product. The marketing is completely different. The narrative is completely different. Storytelling is different. Target audience is different. And you could even go into Target or Walmart or wherever they sell dude wipes at, and you could see dude wipes in the men's section, but you go to the baby wipe section, you're not going to find dude wipes anywhere. But it's the same product, right?
Totally.
So it's crazy how you can frame it.
Yeah. So like here's like the Pampers wipes. Okay, this is like kind of the brand colors, brand tones, stuff like that.
Very, very soft.
Same goddamn product.
Delicate.
And this is how different is that?
And very in your face. I mean? Dude is kind of like almost like futuristic.
Yep, exactly.
Kind of like
dark
you
tones, dark colors.
Yeah, man cave.
Yep.
Black and blue.
Another good example of this is like Pedialyte. We talked about this in the past, but if you look,
really good.
Oof.
Really good.
You got to save that one on the screen. Show that on the screen, kid.
Okay, so if you go to like Pedialyte and then Gatorade Pedialyte. Okay, here's another good one. Okay, so like this is the bottle for Pedialyte. Kid taste approved.
Right.
Okay, so that's your bottle for Pedialyte. The exact same product is put out by Gatorade now. Gatorlight. And it's like different product. Okay, so that
looks like that would slap right now.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, look at this. Like this is me. Yeah, me. This is what I look like when I do my cardio on a 3 incline.
I wouldn't drink Pedialyte, but
I'll have Gatorlight. Exactly. So that's just examples of like the brand that goes into that. Like look at the fonts versus there.
Yeah, it's all in branding and the people that get behind it too.
Yeah. So telling a story, telling a different story. Anything else that you guys want to go into in that?
Russ, let's try to figure out what you were trying to say, because we were talking about colors, we were talking about branding, font, spacing, the one take versus like 30 seconds you have to tell a story.
No, it's
Gone forever.
Okay.
I don't know, but yeah, I think that's, these are all really, really important techniques to understand in the art of storytelling. But at the end of the day, it's a bouquet, right? And you can put all of the pieces together and make it look how you want to help tell your story and get to your goal. You can do it a million different ways, but you have to pick one goal and go that way.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, if you're gonna sit down in front of the camera and create some content, and you're gonna put content out there, take whatever you're thinking about saying, and if you can convey it in a story, like even if you can start it with, so I was talking to someone the other day and they were having this problem. Because of that, they needed this. And then this is what I did to solve it, and this is the end result. It's like, just tell it in a story, as opposed to, I'm a certified financial planner, and I have all these certificates, and I can help you save money. It's like, no, try to make it a story.
Yeah.
It'll work out a little better.
Yep. Cool. Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else we want to go into, or I think that's a wrap, right?
That's it for me.
Yep, I'm good.
All right. Cool.
Tell stories.
Right. Thanks, guys. Tell stories, and we'll see you next time.